In this session, we're going to demonstrate how to view the overall class standard progress in PowerTeacher Pro. It's different than the previous session that I recorded and where I demonstrated how to view the individual student progress. Now we're going to take a look at the entire class as a whole. Again, before we do that, we want to make sure that we're in the correct year and class using the drop-down menu at the top in the center. And term does matter in this sense because we are going to look at one class at a time and we are going to look at it for one specific term. So if you want to change your term now, you can. Otherwise, we can do that when we come right over here to Progress. And then we're going to click on Standards. And you can see that we are now in the Standards Progress view. This is again by whole class, and you can see the class that is currently selected. You can also see the current term. If you'd like to switch to a different term, you can do that right through here. I will, however, show you a way to compare your terms on each of the individual standards as we go through them. You can see in the left-hand column here are all your standards that are listed out from PowerSchool. You can see the overall as well as the parent and child that are listed out for your class and for that course. On the far right-hand side, we see a grade distribution graph, and this is for each of the standards going down the entire column. I only have chosen to input grades for a few, so we'll focus on those. This grades distribution graph is directly linked to the grade scale and the color selection for each item in the grade scale. So this is set in the back end of PowerSchool. Basically, anything to the right of this thick black line is going to not be meeting standard and will be color-coded red or orange. Anything to the left of the thick black line will be yellow, light green, or green, and that means that they're at least meeting the standard for this distribution. So at a quick glance, you can see where your students lie with regard to their standards grades and their input. You can see the grade distribution. I've only scored 2 students, so that's what the number 2 stands for here, and I have 0 students that are not scored or not meeting the standard. A nice benefit to this is I can pick one of these, so I'll pick key ideas and details, and I'll click on this little expand button here, and you can see I get a nice little pop-up dialog box that shows me now more specifically the grades distribution. And I can toggle back and forth between these 3 terms. Right now I'm in term 3, and I can switch over to term 2 and as well term 1, and I can see the individual grades. You can see how the grades are changing. Now this is also showing a comparison as we do this. You can see how it changes. A comparison from term 3 to term 2. If I switch to term 2, you'll see a comparison between term 2 and term 1. And obviously I have nothing to compare previous data with for term 1, so it just compares term 1 to term 1. Now this is a setting that's turned on called Showed Trend. If I turn it off, I don't get that feature. As soon as I turn it on, I can say trend compared against, and I can pick any one of my 3. If I leave it, you'll see that they just kind of compare from the current term to the previous. I also get this nice little indicator of whether the student is going up or going down in that standard based on their trend for the 2 terms. So that is comparison among the current term to a previous term. If I wanted to, I could even say compare term 3 to term 1, and I could go back to the beginning and see overall this student has remained the same and this student has gone up. Now this will obviously display for all the students in the class. This is on the individual standard. In this case I selected key ideas and details. If you want to switch to a different one, you got to come back out and pick, for this instance, literature. I can take a look at this and see again how this is compared term 3 to term 1 or term 3 to term 2. And then I can kind of also go back in time and look at the comparison from term to term, how they were doing. So this is the standards grades distribution visual indicator. Gives you a nice little overview of how your class is doing. This is again not at the individual student level. This is your whole class at a glance with some visual indication of where they are with regard to either below standards or above the standards, meeting these standards. And this can be changed, this color distribution can be changed. However, given the 4-point grade scale that you were using for these standards, this is probably the most appropriate color selection. The assignments will not work in this distribution, just as it didn't in the other individual students distribution screen, because we are not using assignments to record and calculate these standards grades. We're using the single final grade entry method.